our cells are designed in a way to be able to respond to stress. If they weren't, we'd all be dead. We live in a stressful environment. There's toxins and chemicals and radiation and poisons, and inside our body, there's just metabolic, just the process of making energy in the mitochondria produces metabolic waste and damaged proteins and so on and so forth. So there has to be a mechanism or a manner in which our body, our cells, know how to repair themselves, know how to respond to the stress. And so I found that a good analogy to make this understandable is to think of it like a thermostat. If there was a thermostat on the wall of your home, you know that you can go over there and set the thermostat to a specific number, a degree of temperature for that room or for your house or whatever, and that the machinery behind the walls or in the attic or the crawl space, whatever, will work because of that thermostat setting, will work to keep the house comfortable. Or we can call that homeostasis or balanced or whatever. But if the room temperature were to become elevated, if it became hot or if it became cold, there is a relay, there's a switch inside the thermostat that would switch on, and it would tell the machine in the garage or wherever to turn on and do something to condition or heat or warm or alter the ambient environment that we're living inside the home in, until it corrected it and brought it back to the set point whereupon the machine turns off. The switch flips off, the machine stops working, and we're sitting at balance until the next moment in time that the room gets too hot or gets too cold. And so there's this cycling switching going on all the time that's keeping the ambient condition of the room in a balanced, comfortable way. I think that's a great analogy for how the cell works. There's a thermostat in the cell. We call them a transcription factor, or we can just think of them as a redox switch that has the ability to sense or detect the degree or the amount of oxidation in the cell. And if you could think of it this way, just like the room, you're either not right, meaning too hot or too cold, or you're balanced. It's binary. And the cell is the same way. You're either oxidized or you're not. You're in balance. And so it's a really simple concept. The one caveat to that is if you are oxidized, then the next decision point is, well, how much oxidized are you? Are you highly oxidized or are you mildly oxidized? And that's kind of a gradient. It can be up and down on a gradient in that regard. But because of that basic cell biology, the cell's programming is able to sense or detect the degree of stress defined as oxidation inside the cell. And so if we pause for just a moment and say, well, what is this stress that we're talking about? And where does it come from? And the answer, it comes from 10,000 places. Anything in my life, environment, home, diet, behavior, physiology, genetics, whatever, anything can alter, upset, or increase the degree or the amount of oxidation, taking it away from balance or taking it away from homeostasis. And these little sensors in that cellular thermostat, if you will, can detect or sense the amount of oxidative stress that's occurring. And so anything that's going on in our environment, if it's stress, physiologic stress or environmental stress, is seen by the cell as oxidation. And in response to it, just like in the thermostat on the wall, in response to it, something happens in the cellular machinery to respond to that oxidation. If there's a high degree of oxidation, I'm going to get inflammation. That's that NF-κB inflammatory pathway I was talking about earlier. If it's a mild amount, just a small measured amount, we call it a Goldilocks, a just right amount, then it's going to activate a different pathway that turns on my cell defenses. And so this is where the expression, if it doesn't kill you, or what doesn't kill you makes you healthy, in quote marks. And it's the idea that we want to push the body, we want to push the cell just a little bit every once in a while to make it have to respond or work so that it can learn to be resilient and responsive. It can be fit. It can be on the ready to go, like a fire department. The firemen, they don't know when the bell's going to ring or the siren's going to go. They have to always be ready. So they're constantly practicing. They're constantly testing themselves. They're not sitting flat-footed. They're always ready, poised, ready to go. And that's the way our cells can become. And we call that resilience, fitness. I'm capable of responding. I have a good stress response mechanism. And so this is where lifestyle comes in. If I, on purpose, create even falsely a pseudo amount, or I mimic stress through exercise, dieting, fasting, ketoing, all these things in lifestyle, or using ASEA, if I do that, I can, as it were, artificially create stress in my body in a mild way to turn on and activate and practice or become more exercised at these gene pathways that respond. They're the machine in the garage that turns on to make it work better. And what that means in the cell is I'm making more, for example, antioxidants. I'm making more glutathione, which are reducers. That's a reductant or an antioxidant that comes back in and lends electrons. It's reducing this oxidative state by providing electrons and reducing as an antioxidant molecule to then rebalance the cell, whereupon when it's balanced, it turns off the pathway, it turns off the response, and I'm not going on and on. As an aside, people think, well, I'll just take my vitamins. I'll just take a lot of antioxidant vitamins to do that. And sometimes, maybe more often than not, sometimes what happens is that when I top load antioxidant vitamins, we call it exogenously, from commercial sources, or I just really overdo it with the herbs, I'm actually suppressing the oxidative state that my body needs to be able to turn on these native pathways. And we call that just the opposite. It's not oxidative stress, it's now reductive stress. I've over-reduced the cell, and I've kind of robbed the cell a little bit of its capability of being responsive to these challenges. So back to where I was at with the thermostat, I think that analogy is kind of a nice model to think about, because that's what we're doing with ASEA, is we're creating a mild oxidative stress in the body that rapidly moves through the body. It cascades through the body, and it turns on these switches, these redox sensitive switches, that then turn on the DNA, that tells the DNA to make certain proteins called glutathione that can then respond to the original stress upstream to solve or fix it so that it can turn it off and I'm back to balance. That's the healing potential. We need to make a disclaimer here that ASEA is making a product that is not a diagnosis, treatment, or cure for any medical disease. What we're doing is we are assisting the cell to function properly. And this is called root cause. If you're sick or ill or have a disease or whatever, you can take drugs that will suppress the symptoms, that will alter the course of it. And certainly, if I'm in pain, I'd like to have something to get rid of the pain. That's a medication. I'm intervening. But the real question is, aside from trauma, obviously, is like, why am I hurting? Why is there this inflammation? And to be able to fix that, you need a root solution for a root cause. And it's about get your life in order. You can't just drink ASEA and sit on the couch with your remote in one hand, and Cheetos, corn chips or whatever in the other hand, and think that you're doing yourself a favor because you drink ASEA. We could argue that you really are, but the bigger picture is that you would be better if you go walk around the block and do that in addition to and to improve your lifestyle, to improve your health. And so we're just living in a day and age where we have so much against us that, and so many of us are on medications as an intervention, not as a prevention. And so we want root solutions for root causes, and that's what ASEA offers, is an ability to help the cell be able to turn on its stress response or stress adaptive pathways so that we can heal from the inside out. I call it awakening the inner doctor, because we have that natural healing capacity within us. We just have to find a way to turn it off, and hopefully we're intelligent and are enough, and we have eyes that see and ears that hear with regards to all the silly stuff that we're doing to hurt our bodies and our health.
Wonderful.
The real proof of this is what we call the N of one, the number of one. Dose matters because of this hormesis principle. Everybody has a different hormetic set point. And again, the drug mindset is in all of us. We want to know, well, how much should I take and what happens when it doesn't work? And I go, well, what do you mean by work? It's working always at the cellular level. It always works. It has to work. Just like exercise works, just like dieting works, just like fasting works. They all work. But are they going to fix your arthritis and make your arthritis not be there anymore? And the answer is no, you already have arthritis. But this can deal with inflammation, and that's what we're finding in these studies. I'm on the medical professionals board with ASEA, and I can tell you there's some exciting things that we're now beginning to look at, and some of the inflammatory markers that are being looked at that go well beyond what we've already studied in regard to NRF2 and glutathione. And as those studies come back in the next 6 to 12 months, and we start to see some strong indications that there's some, right now I have to say it's conjecture. It's like it's an educated guess. So when we see that start to happen, it will confirm what we kind of already know, because we know what the science would predict, right? That we're decreasing inflammation as well. For those science geeks out there, NRF2, when it's activated, it crosstalks with NFKB. And so you can downregulate inflammatory pathways while you upregulate the NRF2 glutathione pathway. And so that's an exciting thing in the future. It's coming at us.